Hello again, little artists. Today we are talking about Van Gogh and post-impressionism or expressionism. He kind of falls into both those categories, and we're just going to talk about why that is just for a minute and talk about the medium we're going to be using today. And we're going to be replicating probably one of Van Gogh's most famous works of art is the Starry Night, it's called. So first of all, let's just talk about the mediums we're going to be using today. We're going to just use a colored pencil. We're going to probably use a white or a light yellow or any lighter colored pencil you can use to sketch in sort of the details before we start, where the different points of interest are in this picture. And then we are going to use these oil pastels to color in the picture. Now Van Gogh usually worked in oil paints like we talked about, but we are just going to be using pastels today to try a new medium, and oil paints for beginners and little young students in a class setting like this would be pretty challenging to use for a number of reasons, one of which is they take a long time to dry, so like weeks. So we are not going to be using those today, but oil pastels are great because they're kind of an in-between between an oil paint and a crayon. So they're somewhat waxy, kind of like a crayon, but they have some oil in it too to make them more malleable, which means like they move around more. So they come in lots of different styles, from like a pretty inexpensive one that would be somewhat more waxy and more challenging to use, to a higher grade one that is a little bit softer and easier to move around. But it kind of is just your preference of whatever works for you, and whatever we have in class today, that's what we're going to be using. And I have kind of just sort of a middle ground one here to use today. So when we're talking about Expressionism and some of the techniques Van Gogh used, remember we talked about he had a lot of bright colors. You can see the bold bright colors here with the yellows and the blues and how they're kind of contrasting each other. They're kind of popping off of each other because they're such like a deep dark sort of a sad color to a popping bright color. So there's this sort of emotes a lot of feeling when you look at this because of those contrasts. We also have lots of motion happening in here. If you can see the stars here seem like they're glowing and swirling, and the moon, and then I don't know if it's wind or something flowing through there. It's kind of up to your interpretation if it's just the wind at night that you see flowing through there, but you see the motion in the sky there. And then this is a cypress tree down in the front, in the foreground. This was very dark, really close to the viewer. And then some rolling blue hills here in the background, and some trees as it comes closer to the town with a church here with a steeple. And just some things that you can notice in his technique. You can see all the brush strokes here. They look like just little jagged lines as it goes around as he makes the motion. So we're going to kind of try and use that today when we're doing our pastels, where we can just do swipes of color. You can also blend pastels with your fingers as you go if you want. And if you get messy as you're going, you just use a paper towel or a wipe to wipe your hands off. If your colors as we're going get mixed together on the actual pastel, you can rub that off gently on your paper towel too to clean it, so you don't get a bunch of blue on your white, and then the next time when you want to just use white, it'll come out as white and blue mixed together. So just some things to think about. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to start a sketch in where the different visual points are on here, and where some of the stars are. So to simplify for you guys, to do all this detail would take more time than we have. So I'm going to pick the moon and just pick out a few of the stars. You don't have to do them all, maybe some of the bigger ones and maybe one or two little ones, whatever you feel like. If you want to try and do them all, you totally can. I just don't want us to run out of time. And then the cypress trees, and I'm just going to very simplify the rolling hills back here and just a few shapes for buildings. So yeah. so we have just sketched in kind of all the different features here. When you're doing the buildings here, I just did some just general outlines of where the roof shapes are. It can be really rough in here. I know we've talked about perspective quite a bit, but you can, he has some perspective in here, but it's so loose that you can just really just sketch it in, just some horizontal lines here and there and angles for the rooftops, because all this stuff is so flowy that any straight lines here you're going to be able to tell through Expressionism that these are buildings with these man-made shapes here, as opposed to all the organic shapes back here. So don't worry about too much about the detail of the angles of the building and all that. I would just sketch it in quickly if I were you. Okay, so one thing I forgot to mention was we're using just some black construction paper, and there's a lot of different types of paper you can use for oil pastels, but for our class I thought it would be easier for you guys to start with a darker color, since this is such a dark picture, so that if you don't, if you're not able to fill in the whole thing with pastels and color it all in, you'll still get the same feel of this painting because you're not starting with a white paper, if that makes sense. So that's why we chose the black construction paper today. So we'll see how, hopefully that turns out well for us. So I'm going to go ahead and start. I usually start in the things farthest away and then work my way forward. But since we have these outlines here, I can make sure to not cover them up as I go as much as possible. So I'm going to actually start with the stars. So the different colors here, I'm going to start with the center of the stars, which are kind of a darker color, and then it seems like it uses a lighter yellow and then some white mixed in there as he goes out. So I'm going to do that real quick with the darker. I have different colors of pastel here, like a darker yellow versus a lighter yellow. And I was told that these work better if you warm them up a little bit. So I'm going to warm these up with my hands just a little bit, and they get messy. So it's okay. Go ahead and get messy. So I'm just going to color it in kind of like you would with a crayon. And the thicker you put it on, the better it's going to work for you. So I'm going to go ahead and do the stars and the moon, and then do some swirling colors with the lighter around it. And maybe just a dab here and there of some white too. So I'll do that, and I'll probably speed it up here.
When there's nothing I can do, and it seems all hope is gone, in the night I call on you, and it's your light that leads me on.
Okay. Now I'm not going to do any blending yet until I get the blue in there, and then I can start mixing it a little more if you want, because remember these unlike just normal crayons, you can blend these a little bit depending on how much oil is in your type of pastel. So let me go ahead and do the blue. I'm going to do like the medium blue color. So I have found 3 different blues here. I got a dark, a medium, and a light. You can see in here the different tones here. There's a darker one here. There's some medium mixed in. This is the darkest blue here, down here. And then there is some black mixed in here too. I'm not going to do any of that yet because I want to see how much of the black of the paper comes through first. So I'm going to do most of this medium thing, the medium blue that's happening here. And if you notice, look really close, you see even the blue in the background has brush strokes to show directionality happening here, like flow in the sky. So I'm going to try and follow that. It looks like it goes along sort of horizontally until it gets over here and then starts to swoop down this way, and then there's some going up and around the moon. And then I'm going to blend some of the blue in with the edges of this, but I'm going to try and be careful so I don't want it to turn to green. You know, remember blue and yellow make green, so we don't want to make it too green. There's a tiny bit of that happening here, but not much. Okay, so I'm going to do the sky. You can do this with me. Go ahead and work along with me as you go, and if you need to pause, if people are struggling or getting behind, just go ahead and pause it, and then we'll just move on from there.
Out of the dark you rescued me. I know that you have set me free. When I was blind you made me see that I'm not alone. You see me and you know my heart. You had a plan for every scar. Your love's been with me from the start, and I'm not alone.
do the dark blue in the landscape here. And this has more, the brush strokes for this, if you notice, they're sort of linear up and down this way, and then there's some swooping this way, and they sort of like rolling hills. So I'm going to just do those really fast.
And you, I finally found my place.
And then this lighter blue hill there.
And in your love, my soul can rest. Out of the dark, you rescued me.
And then all the houses are outlined in black, but they're a variety of different colors. So you can just kind of pick. We're not trying to replicate it exactly. So if you pick a few that are light blue, some of that are medium. If you have a brown, you could do a brown one. This one, the church, is the light bluish, almost white back here. But they are all outlined in black on the edges of the buildings. And then there's some windows that are lit up here and there, so that with the yellow popping there. And then the last thing I'm going to do is the cypress tree here, and then just sort of look and compare the two, how it's looking all together. And remember, this is just a really fast one that we're doing in class to get a feel for the medium, and you can work on it more at home if you want, if you have pastels, or you can also use crayons with it. But okay, so I'm just going to finish that out.
I know that you have set me free. When I was blind, you made me see that I'm not alone. You see me and you know my heart. You had a plan for every scar. Your love's been with me from the start, and I'm not alone. No, I'm not alone.
Okay, so I have all the details in that I think I want. If you want to blend more, you can blend with your finger here and there if you want, to get it to blend. I kind of like it scratchy, where you can see all the individual marks, because I feel like that has more of the feel of what his painting was like. But there are a lot more details in here. Obviously, we're just trying to do a quick one for today, but you can keep working on it as much as you feel like you want to. Maybe, I actually had, for the little window highlights, I had to push pretty hard on my pastels to get them to kind of take off a chunk here and there. But it's really just whatever you feel like. One thing I forgot to mention is if you get too much pastel in one spot or wherever, you can go back in. If you have a palette knife or something to scrape with, you can actually remove some of it. So I wasn't really happy with how my moon was looking after I finished, everything. So I went ahead and went back in and used my palette knife to take off some of it, because I felt like it was just getting too wide. This moon is a nice sliver of a moon. So I went ahead and took my palette knife and scraped off some of the thickness of the moon and colored it back in and added just a little bit more orange to make it have, I felt like it had a little bit more of a feel of this moon that Van Gogh had. So remember, there's other things here that this was just a simplified version, but if you have a palette knife and can scrape away here and there, I probably wouldn't use my fingernail, but something to scratch with, you can do that to take some off if you need to, or to move some of it around. But yeah, thanks so much for doing art with me today, and I hope you have fun. Bye.